An overgrown garden in St Andrews has become a thorny issue amid a row over the future of the site and a test case of recent changes to the law around land reform. Fortney Limited didn't want to sell to community group Poets Nuke, who planned to turn it into a public garden. The landowners, an Isle of Man-based trust, were compelled to sell by Scottish Government ministers under the terms of 2020 land reform laws. It's the first time the legislation's been used to force a community buyout of land. Well, earlier I spoke to Dr. Josh Doble, who's policy manager at Community Land Scotland, who believes the landmark case is in the public interest.
There's a bigger structural benefit here in terms of what's going on because of the precedent that could be set if this particular case goes through and finds in favour of the Scottish Government and in favour of the community. What
would you say then to those that own the land and others that maybe agree with them that say, you know, they did have legitimate plans for this site which were rejected. They put forward a few proposals to the council that were rejected. So they might argue this land wasn't neglected. They were actually trying to repurpose it.
So I can't speak on the particulars of the planning permissions that they tried to get through. But from our point of view, if they'd acted on the recommendations from those planning applications and had pursued other potential avenues, particularly with the community, then maybe there could have been a different outcome. But the really important point for us from this legislation is the fact that this sets the precedent that if you're going to own and manage land in Scotland, you do so in the public interest. So your ownership of the land means that you're delivering wider benefits for the community or for wider public benefits that could be climate or biodiversity and things like that. The fact that the Scottish Government has come out so strongly in support of this, we see as a really encouraging precedent, and we want to see that rolled out because landowners who engage, as community landowners do, engage with public interest concerns, and they really focus on, you know, how do we maximise what this land is doing and deliver for everyone in this local area. They're working with the public interest. They have nothing to worry about. If you're an absentee owner or you're an owner that's sitting on land because you're waiting for the price to go up or you're speculating, you're not using that land as productively as you could. You're not working in the public interest. And maybe someone else should own it. And that's the kind of precedent it sets. And it really puts...
It's not a dangerous precedent then. Some might say that it could ultimately be.
No, so we see it as a really exciting precedent. And so if it causes a bit of noise within the kind of Scottish land sector, really, the really important thing to remember is that this is just aligning us with a lot of other European countries and a lot of other countries internationally who have these kind of laws in place.
Well, that's the feeling from Community Land Scotland. But Stephen Young, who's Director of Policy at Scottish Land and Estates, is among those worried about what precedent this decision could set.
We don't disagree that communities should have the ability to seek intervention if land is truly abandoned or neglected. But I think it has to meet the tests that are laid out in the legislation. When the Act states that transfer should only occur if it's the most practical way or the only way of achieving benefit for the community.
Well, the argument put forward was that the other plans that had been proposed for this particular piece of land weren't approved by the local council. This was a way of having this land put to better use and in the interests of the local community. Have you ever any reason to believe that that wouldn't have been the case?
I'm not up to speed exactly on the exact case of this, so it's hard to comment. Now, what I would say is any landowner who's trying to make attempts to improve land or change use should that's not really what would be termed as abandoned and neglected land. So I think giving them the opportunity to bring forward more ideas would be good.
Now, this was the first case of its kind in Scotland, wasn't it, in regard to this legislation? What do you think the repercussions could be? Do you think we could see future cases now, similar cases?
Potentially, yes. I think it is the first time the legislation's been used, as you say, so therefore it is a test of that legislation. I think there's the two parts of it where you might see more cases like this coming forward, but also we need to be careful of the impact it has on investment in Scotland, what impact that has on people who are looking to invest in Scotland, looking to drive forward with new business opportunities, whether that affects confidence, whether that affects lending against that land. So the impacts could be quite severe in the long term. So it's important that this is well thought through.
What do you think should change then in the future in regard to decisions like this when you're trying to balance public interest and also commerce, business essentially?
Yeah, it is always about that, what's in the public interest, and it's making sure we're using the legislation properly and for its intended purpose. So this is not about just having a change of ownership as such. It has to be about the benefit to the community, and that has to be clear. And it has to have to be clear that it meets the tests of the legislation and in the spirit of which the legislation was intended.